law firms are incredibly unique in compared to lead gen type businesses because all of the revenue that they're collecting within the current year is based off of prior year efforts. So what I mean by this is having really strong data infrastructure is going to enable the business to make very calculated business decisions.
Bo Royal here, co-founder and CEO of Pareto Legal, where we help injury lawyers increase their case volume, revenues, and profits with business strategy, digital advertising, and analytics. You're listening to the Pareto Legal podcast, where I feature world-class attorneys, entrepreneurs, and legal experts. And today I am joined by fellow Pareto Legal co-founder and COO Jake Barufkin. Jake and his team help our law firm clients turn their data into insights and action. That said, we'll be diving into the world of law firm reporting in this episode, specifically what the future of law firm reporting looks like, the metrics that all personal injury law firms should be tracking, how AI will impact law firms' reporting and measurement, and more. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty questions, do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about your story, specifically how you landed in the legal space?
Absolutely. And I feel like everyone has a different journey to either the legal space or the reporting area. So I would love to tell mine because I feel like it is rather unique. On my side, I actually came from finance. So what I mean by that is I worked in corporate accounting, I worked in corporate finance. I worked my way from there into the analytics world because I was just a little bit more data focused and data driven. I worked with attribution rules, customer reporting, CRM systems, things along those lines. And then ultimately, I found my home on more of the operator side. So that's building out analytics teams, that's working with the operations team and really honing in on the process. And that's brand side for me. So I spent a lot of time consulting early in my career, but I really turned those consulting experiences into how to help brand side operators really grow their business.
Awesome. And when you say analytics, I feel like that's a buzzword that people use commonly today. What do you mean by analytics?
Yeah, let me dive into that a little bit more. So what I mean by analytics is it's more of a reporting department for the overall company. So when I think of a company as more of a matrix organization, a analytics department is a support department. So what that does is it works with various other departments within the company. So that could be marketing, it could be finance, it could be revenue generating departments like paid search, consulting, or on the legal side, it could be the different types of law practices and the cases that they're generating. And with that being said, they all have different analytical needs. This could be reporting on finance, it could be reporting on operations, it could be reporting on marketing data. And data is rather agnostic, it's just ones and zeros, but someone needs to be able to synthesize this and turn them into insights, actions, and measurement tools. So that way we can monitor how the business is performing and make sure that it is ultimately reporting up to the owner's standard and how they set it.
So from your perspective, analytics reporting, it really transcends departments, right? It's something that touches every single part of the business, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not in a siloed piece, but it's something that really needs to marry up to all the other areas because it adds that extra, it's a catalyzer in my mind. It's one of those things where every department needs an analyst, but not every department can manage that analyst. So having someone who manages all the analysts on behalf of those departments is really the best way to grow a analytics practice within a company.
So honing in on law firms specifically, why should lawyers and law firm owners, operators care about analytics, measurement, and reporting in the first place?
All businesses should care. I'll start there, but lawyers especially should care. I think they're one of the most important firms to really have these dialed in numbers, metrics, and KPIs because the way that business is really operated and run. Law firms are incredibly unique in compared to other B2B type, or not B2B, I'm sorry, lead gen type businesses because all of the revenue that they're collecting within the current year is based off of prior year efforts. So it really puts a lot of onus on the forecasting side of the business. And this really sits within the controller's realm. So what I mean by this is having really strong data infrastructure is going to enable the business to make very calculated business decisions as relates to how they manage their cash flow. So it's going to be all their marketing costs, it's going to be all their litigation costs, and it's going to be hiring people. But not only that, they need to really get an idea of where their revenue is going to sit, not in the short-term lens of like 60 to 90 days, but in a long-term lens of like 3 to 5 year strat plans. Because a lot of these injury cases do take time to settle. The juicy cases that are really those multi-7, 8-figure settlements may take 2 to 3+ years. So having a really strong grip on your pipeline and understanding the value of your pipeline is going to be the most important thing to making sure you're doing what's best for your business and putting your lawyers and your team up for the most amount of success that they can hit.
Great. And so you touched a little bit on, I think, like the operations and partly the finance side of analytics. Obviously, tracking those sides of the business can really help properly forecast and staff the firm. But let's talk more about let's say like marketing and intake, for example. So what metrics, what things need to be tracked to start from a marketing and an intake perspective?
That's a good question. And I think we should start with intake first because it will lead into the overall marketing helm. Because in my mind, marketing does encompass a little bit of intake, but they do independently run. So that being said, intake is very much, in my mind, almost a sales role because they're getting inbound calls that are coming in and their job is to convert those calls into signed cases at a very, very efficient rate. So with that being said, the first overall barometer metric everyone should be looking at is just the raw total leads that they're generating and a qualified lead. And a qualified lead would be anything that they can attempt to monetize. So that's keeping it as an internal case or referring it out to other law firms, which we'll talk about referrals, I'm sure, later in the podcast, because that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. But after that's done, on the intake side, on the operation of intakes, it's the amount of time it takes to close the lead. It's the amount of time it takes to get the case moved over to the other team. But not only that, we also need to look at how many cases we're rejecting and the reasons why, and how that data feeds into the marketing engine. Because ultimately, marketing is generating these leads either on a paid or an unpaid manner. Paid would mean they're paying their own cash out of pocket. So this is like PPC ads, but unpaid would be like referrals coming in. It's really good to really give that feedback loop back to marketing because it will make marketing make better educated decisions and strategy changes to ultimately get qualified leads up and signed cases up. Now, we can even go down the rabbit hole further and talk about how we can get better data back into the marketing engine via intakes help. And what I mean by that is really on the PPC side, it's going to be something called offline uploads, closed loop reporting. It's this ivory tower that all these agencies want to have and want to be able to work with their lawyers to make sure that they're optimizing and spending money on only cases that ultimately go through the pipeline and are the highest quality cases. And what I mean by that is we really, on the marketing side, shouldn't treat all leads equally and all cases equally. So if we can manage the strategy and the spend to ultimately what is being signed up, that is the best present intake can give marketing, in my opinion, and how that analytics communication can really just, push this or push any company really further.
So what are the benefits then of having that closed loop tracking, as you say? You mentioned it's this ivory tower, it's this ideal end state that every law firm should strive for as it pertains to their reporting. Why is that so important for law firms to have?
Yeah, I'm going to actually answer that in two ways. I want to answer first why it's important, and then I want to give the flip side, what happens when you don't have it in place. Because I think understanding that it's an opportunity cost in not doing it and what that detriment could do to your business. But let's talk about the good side of it first, right? Let's say you get 100 leads that come in. These leads could come in through Google ads, through PPC ads. They can come in through the local services ads, which is a new ad format that came out that's super, super strong for a lot of the lawyer-based industries. Then there's different types of DSP networks that can be pushing it. Then there's social media platforms and there's directories. All of these different channels that marketing uses, even traditional like TV and billboard, are generating leads. On the PPC side, we have a very unique ability to make sure that of all the leads that we're generating, we only want to spend money on those that either qualified or ultimately are converting to case. So if we talk about our company, which is Pareto PPC, we talk about the Pareto PPC principle, which is the 80-20 rule. If we find out that 20% of the marketing spend is generating 80% of the qualified leads, what we want to do is double down on that 20% of spend and really maximize that before we move into these other tactics. where if you don't have this closed loop in place, you're really at the mercy of just where you think the total leads are coming from, which there can be a big discrepancy between total leads, qualified leads, and signed cases. So getting that like common denominator down to signed cases is going to be the best quality of strategic decision making a marketing person can make.
And then
And then,
you said there was a
yeah,
second part to that.
yeah, let's talk about the flip side of like not doing it, right? If you're not doing any of this, that means that you're not optimizing your spend according to where you're spending the cases. And all you're doing is you're spending money on where you think total leads are coming from. So you're really missing that bottom funnel and optimizing for that bottom funnel. You're only optimizing for the top of the funnel when it comes to marketing in terms of leads.
Got it. And then isn't there other benefit to if you're pushing that data back into the systems? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So with Google Ads specifically, as well as Facebook and Microsoft, they had a lot of new automated bid strategies. So the more data you're passing back into the engine on either a qualified lead basis or a converted lead basis, the PPC engines are going to optimize their spend, push all their clicks and their traffic, and really push all their campaigns to specific audiences, keywords, geo demographics, all the PII related data for that persona that is ultimately converting in your CRM tool. So that way you're not wasting spend and you're really spending money where the 80% of the results are coming from and not the other side, which is really where you need to be, especially for lawyers when CPCs are through the roof. They're one of the highest in the industry. It's all over.
Yeah, we're no stranger to $500 CPCs. No, that's awesome. I really understand now the benefit of pushing that data back in. Obviously, it's only going to make lawyers' advertising spend more and more effective over time if they can push that data back into their advertising campaigns. So, all right, I'm glad we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on the marketing and intake front. I want to bring it back to operations and finance. What things should lawyers and law firms be tracking from a operations and a financial perspective?
Yeah, and I'm going to keep this high level because there's a lot of data points that we can track within operations and finance. But from an owner perspective, the most important things to really track on the operations side are going to be how many cases you're opening up every single month. So that way you make sure you're properly staffed. How many cases you're closing. So you know if there's a delta, you're either adding from the pipeline or you're net removing and decreasing your total pipeline. On top of that, you really want to maintain your overall pipeline worth. So there's things called total pipeline and adjusted pipeline. So what that really means is how many cases do you have in your whole ecosystem that you're managing that could be generating for money and cash. But on the same side, you want to take a look at how many are just opening up and at different parts of the stages. Because if you find out 50 to 60% of your cases are only 120 to 160 days new, then you have a very, immature pipeline. So what that means, it's going to take a while to really actualize some of those settlements. So that's really from an operational standpoint as it relates to how to maintain and operate and really push those cases through the finish line. From a finance perspective, it's going to be a lot simpler because it's just going to be looking at basic cash flow forecasting. So it's cash in and cash out. You're taking a look at your overall marketing expenses and you're working with the operations team to do short-term forecasting. So that's 90 days to, potentially 6 months to really make sure you're honing in on the finance side. And the reason why I say that, it's so crucial to really get forecasting done right for a law firm, because I've seen law firms just make very, very bad decisions when it relates to finances because they don't have a pulse on their way to their pipeline. And what I mean by that is, and this is going back to, why law firms are so unique, they generate most of their money from prior year efforts. So current year income is based off of efforts from the prior year, the prior 2 years, the prior 3 years, even prior 5 years. So if they really want to bolster revenue within the current year, they can't do that. They're at the mercy of however much they can settle. So it really becomes a cash flow management issue. So this also goes into conversations on if you're taking out lines of credit for litigation costs. Why is it so important to have a strong case management tool? If you're taking out lines of credit for working capital, this could be marketing costs. It could be people costs. It could be general business costs. Really getting a pulse on that cash flow and when these settlements are coming through are going to really help you bolster how you make decisions as it relates to your business.
Yeah, it's really a balancing act, and it's something that we talk about with current clients and prospective clients is, if a law firm is looking to grow, over a 12-month period, it's really hard, especially if it's a personal injury firm, given that, 12, 18, 24-month delay between when the case was opened and when the revenue was realized, right? The case is settled and the fee is collected. So no, that all makes sense. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about reporting tools. What reporting tools, technologies, softwares are you typically recommending to law firms today, and why?
There's a lot of different BI stacks that you can really use to kind of like hone in on these metrics, these reporting suites. But from a very, very high level, let's start with just the case management tool. Every law firm needs a very, very strong case management tool that also takes in all the lead data and all of the different, those UTM parameters that we talked about in order to get those offline uploads back into the advertising engines. So figuring out what data schema works best is going to be hyper important on your operating tool. But case management is the number one software every law firm needs to get right. Because if that's not right, you're going to be working 10 steps, against yourself with every decision or every guess you're going to make on, is this working or is this not working? Once the case management tool is really figured out, it goes into a very strong finance tool. And this is normally QuickBooks, and I would prefer QuickBooks Online. I know a lot of accountants are going to scream at me, yell at this podcast. QuickBooks Desktop will always be there, but QuickBooks Online is strong because of the open source integrations. And what I mean by that is it natively integrates with tools like Salesforce, which is a very strong case management tool, FileVine, Clio. I think even like Panther Docs has integrations now. It's so important to get finance data back into the case management tool for like case settlement numbers, litigation costs, if there's weekly fees, retro fees, things like that. It really puts the onus on the attorney understanding where they are from a financial standpoint on the case. Once we get the case management tool and we get the finance tool right, intake tools are extra credit for me, because a lot of CRM tools can do an intake tool very well, but intake has a special need. And what I mean by that is it's not managed the same way a case is managed. So this could be Lawmatics, this could be Clio Grow, or this could be just building out another instance in Salesforce that is unique for the intake team. Because really, intake needs their own metrics, their own workforce, and they can't have it muddy with the paralegals, the secretaries, and the attorneys. So giving them automated follow-ups, e-sign document workflows, all that information is going to be incredibly important. And then the last piece is going to be a file management tool. You could use things like, the Microsoft Azure cloud. You can use built-in for what already is in all the CRM tools, but really getting a way to take all the discovery, all the data that you have, the demand riders that are being sent, all the different medical records that you're collecting and storing them in a way where not only the team can see them, but you can send them to defense counsel and you can send them to different people within your company safely. That's going to be the most important thing.
I want to shift gears again to talk about data compliance and maintaining ethical standards as it pertains to the data collection that's happening at law firms. In your opinion, Jake, what measures should law firms take to ensure that their reporting practices align with those ethical standards and regulatory requirements? And how does this contribute to maintaining trust with clients? I know that's kind of a big question.
It is. I feel like I should bring a lawyer in here just for legal to make sure I'm saying everything right. But if I'm being honest with you, the main two things are going to be HIPAA compliance and GDPR compliance. HIPAA compliance is just very, very quickly making sure that the PII data is securely saved. Same thing with the GDPR side. But for the most part, we really want to make sure there's no leakage of data outside of the firm or to partners that should have never received the data. So this is using things like two-factor authentication on all your software, making sure secure links are being used, or when you're sending files, you're using secure links only, and making sure that, in my mind, kind of like a second understanding of this is really on the IT side, and making sure that you have really strong cybersecurity, making sure that your IT system's bulletproof if you're not using VPNs, but you're using some sort of data monitoring system on computers for bulk downloads, and having some sort of phishing tool in place, because phishing is still a thing, unfortunately, in this era, and a lot of people are still getting caught by it. And it's a very easy way to leak usernames, passwords, bank accounts, medical records information, or things about your claimant, which you will be liable for, unfortunately, as a law firm if that data does get out.
Yeah, it's something that I know our our law firm clients have concerns about and ask about commonly, but it seems like as long as those two boxes are checked, specifically, I think you said HIPAA compliance and GDPR compliance,
Yeah.
everything for the most part should be fine, correct?
Yeah, and that's inside the business and on the website too. So that's like privacy policy and things along those lines, and how we're using the client data to even contact them, making sure that that's all compliant as well.
Great. I want to talk about AI. I know it's kind of the biggest buzzword of 2023. It's probably going to be a buzzword for the next decade. So with the rise of AI, how can law firms start incorporating AI into their reporting systems to either provide deeper insights or get strategic advice so that the leaders in the firm can start making better decisions? Is there a path for firms to start incorporating that AI into their reporting?
The first thing I would say is always treat AI with a grain of salt. The only reason why I say that is because in the lawyer practice, you still need to review some of your own work, but there is a ton of room for AI here to really automate what I call the poor quality work. So what I mean by this is just off the bat, I mean, live chat tools are such a strong AI tool that everyone can immediately implement. So there are softwares out there where a lot of companies and marketing agencies will recommend to lawyers for a website. So that way there's a real person on the end communicating with this claimant. In today's day and age, that's not necessary. We can use software like AI that uses decision trees or even has personalized responses that are going back to communicate with the claimant to really just capture the lead data. So that's like the first way that someone can just like warm their toes into AI to see if they even like beginning to really integrate it into their practice. After that, there's so many other ways that you can go with this. Once you integrate it with your CRM tool, you can really automate a lot of the day-to-day management of like how you calculate a lot of the deliverables. So what I mean by that is there are AI demand writer packet integrations out there. So that way you're making sure you're getting the proper settlement and you're not like undervaluing your case. There's medical record summary tools. So that way you don't have to read through hundreds of pages and it docs it all for you and adds all the notation. There's email generating tools that help you generate your emails. So that way you save time on just typing emails in general. And then one of the easiest ones to use if you're not using any of them for like medical records or just the overall litigation is AI's note-taking and summary tools on the meetings. And that's a huge time saver as it relates to taking notes, taking next step actions, and sending it out to the team. So that way the team doesn't have to do a lot of that manual work.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like everyone is still trying to kind of figure this whole AI thing out. Those are some great immediate recommendations that firms can start running with to incorporate AI into their practice. I want to touch on one final thing here, and it's really looking ahead to the future, right? So in terms of 2024 and beyond, what trends do you anticipate will shape the future of law firm reporting, and how can firms stay ahead of the curve to meet the evolving needs of their clients and industry standards?
I feel like this industry has evolved a lot in the past, I would say like 30 years. So I almost want to talk about that first because it really sets the stage for my answer here. So I'd say over the past 30 to 50 years, this industry has had a major swing in how it's being managed. So historically, this was a solo practicing firm. So what I mean by that is most of the law firms out there were single lawyers or maybe one or two lawyers who had a small team around them. And they were really in the maestro type organization. So they were the one or the two partners who did a lot of the work and they had support team helping them. That really migrated to then a lawyer kind of moving into an operating role. So that means is they're no longer litigating cases, but they're managing the team to a standard on how they expect the cases to be litigated, but really managing the day-to-day of the business and not inside of the business. That kind of graduated again to hiring business operators. So people that don't have law degrees, people that are new to the legal space, but know how to run business as well. That's kind of what we're in right now, but we're starting to see what I think could happen in the future, where it's more PC and VE backed companies or private investors or really just big marketing firms really becoming marketing agencies first. So what I mean by that is they're spending a ton of money, driving a ton of the current leads in the market share, and then referring them out to solo practitioners or smaller businesses to kind of build their pipeline.
Yeah, the Morgan and Morgans, the Top Dog Laws of the world.
Exactly, where I always want to call them, if we were to compare it to like restaurants, it's almost like shadow kitchens or like, those types of industries where they're keeping the top 2-3% for like very, very strong case studies, but they're referring out the small ones and letting everyone else make the profit margins off of it.
Top 2-3%. I just want to clarify that top 2-3% of the best cases, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the best cases, because those are the 8 to 9 settlement cases. Those are the ones that are going to be on national news, and that's how they get their awareness out for their brand and what they're able to drive. So that's really going to help them on the marketing side. But that being said, let's kind of go back to what I can expect. I can expect higher costs per cases as we continue in this industry, because it's only going to get more competitive. More players are going to be there, and they're going to be willing to spend more money. So going back to what this needs from a reporting perspective, it really puts the onus on the law firms and agencies like ours to help our clients really understand what the cost of their cases are on a monthly basis, really making sure that we're hitting the financial goals that they need in terms of, how we're, acquiring these cases. But it's really honing in on your metrics and knowing how your data is being run, because it's only going to get more competitive and it's squeezing profit out as time continues. So really honing in on your process, honing in on your systems, and just making sure that we can still continually be hyper competitive over time is going to be the most important thing. And I think we can talk about social proof next too, and like review generation, because I think that's a huge piece that I think I forgot to talk about, but that's still a hot topic as it comes to lawyers and how that affects marketing and just their overall business too.
Do you want to talk about that?
Definitely, yeah. I feel like I should have earlier, and I apologize. But like going into what we expect and what the standard is moving forward, social proof is more important than it has ever been as it relates, just because of the way that the Google My Business accounts are running and the local services ads are running. So really making sure that you're soliciting all your reviews for your clients, you're getting 5-star reviews, is going to enable you to generate lower cost per cases at scale, which is the ivory tower of what any personal injury or injury-based lawyer is really going to want.
Great. Jake, thanks so much for the time today. Appreciate you answering all these analytics and reported related questions. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in on this episode, and stay tuned for more episodes down the line. Thanks, everyone.